And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Denise Saperzan, Chair of the Associates of the Asper School of Business and President of Styria Global. Denise will be introducing our keynote speaker, and I welcome Denise to the stage.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Good evening. I'm Denise Saperzan, and it is my privilege to be here this evening as Chair of the Associates of the Asper School of Business. And thank you to all of you for your attendance as we gather to mark a milestone in the relationship between Canada and the United States. The Associates of the Asper School of Business, a membership that represents 368 of Manitoba's business leaders, are honored to be partnering with the Canadian Business Historic Association and the Business Council of Manitoba to present this evening's event. We commend the association, led by Joe Martin, for this exclusive and timely dinner. Thank you. Earlier this evening, we had the privilege of hearing from leading voices in industries impacted by the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement. And now, I have the distinct honor of welcoming our keynote speaker, the Honorable Gary Doer, who has directly impacted free trade between the two countries. In addition to serving as Canada's ambassador to the United States for 6 years, Gary was retained by the Alberta government for negotiations with the Trump administration, and he recently attended a trade delegation to the U.S. headed by our Premier and industry leaders. Gary Doer served as Manitoba's 20th Premier from 1999 to 2009, enjoying unprecedented popularity throughout his time in office. During his term, he worked with the Asper Foundation and the Manitoba community to negotiate the location for the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, ensuring its now iconic placement at the Forks. After retiring from provincial politics, Gary's strong relationship with the United States would see him appointed as Canada's ambassador to the U.S. He served in this capacity from 2009 to 2016. Since the end of his term as envoy, he has remained heavily invested in Canada-U.S. relations. Currently, he serves as the Canadian co-chair of the Woodrow Wilson Institute, located in Washington. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing Gary discuss the path forward as he offers his insights into the future of Canada-U.S. trade. As a preeminent expert on the relationship between Canada and the United States, he has a uniquely authoritative position on the matter. As chair of the Associates of the Asper School of Business, I am honored to welcome Gary Doer to the stage.
Well, thank you very much, Denise. Always trained to have water around. It's okay. I got it. Thanks. Thanks, Denise. Wonderful introduction. I got my big speech ready to roll. Thank goodness we had one of these agendas for the evening. I want to start off by thanking Joe Martin. I first met Joe at the Duff Robin 90th birthday party at the an NDP favorite spot, the Manitoba Club just down the street. And it was great to meet all the staff and Jim Burns and others and listen to the stories and listen to the lessons learned when Duff was Premier. I mentioned it today in one of the media dealing with the Duff Roblin Award in a couple days that people may not know this, but Duff Roblin, the floodway, they move more earth than the Suez Canal. Not the Panama Canal, but the Suez Canal. So it shows you what a great, wonderful vision he had. And it sort of reminds us of people that were leaders, political leaders, making big decisions, unpopular decisions that had a lasting benefit to our community, to our country, and to our neighborhood. So I think it's a real honor to have Joe here running this event and doing such a great job. I also want to say I grew up with Rick Waugh, and the stories between both of us growing up will remain silent. Needless to say, we struck out a lot when we were younger. Having said that, I'm not supposed to say that, am I? Denise said don't say that. But we had a wonderful time together, and then of course he moved on, to be CEO of the Bank of Nova Scotia, and he was really concerned that his mother, when she read newspapers and when her bridge partners would be playing bridge with her, that nobody knew. And so he decided to have his annual meeting of the Bank of Nova Scotia moved out of Toronto to Winnipeg, so his mother and the Bridge Club would realize what a big deal Rick Waugh was. And so Rick phoned me. He said, I'm having the annual meeting here. We'd like to have the reception, the Bank of Nova Scotia reception, in the rotunda of the Legislative Building. I said, Rick, you're a bank. You're a bank. We can't have you in the Legislative Building. And, if that happens, maybe the Free Press will be there and take my picture, and, then my mother and her bridge friends will think I'm a really big deal because they don't read the Financial Times, or they don't read the Globe and Mail financial section. And so I said, Rick, you can't do that. I'll be fired. And so then I thought about it overnight and came up with an idea that Rick, the Bank of Nova Scotia, would donate $20,000 to the ballet and $20,000 to the symphony. Sold. He got the rotunda, his mother got the picture, and the ballet and the symphony got the money. So it was great to hear Rick's generosity again. I thought we had a wonderful panel. Politicians didn't do too well in that panel. If I recall correctly. We did not peak too early with the comments made in the discussions that had unfolded. But I think I've always liked trade. I always thought it was good for Manitoba. I always thought more jobs are created with trade. But I always thought there was also one weakness of the trade agreement. So if I can be honest about it, it's part of the history, and I hope it's not part of the future. The one weakness I thought in the trade agreement, I think it came out of a UW professor, but if I recall correctly, that water was not included. So at some point, it could be treated as a commodity and therefore be subject to the rules of the free trade agreement. So one of the first pieces of legislation we passed actually in Manitoba was to ban the exportation of water out of this province. And I saw a couple of days ago, one of the candidates mentioned that he might be looking at water for California. I was really pleased that we passed that legislation to make it illegal under any trade agreement. So water stays in Manitoba, water stays in Canada, and we have to put that in any trade agreement that we negotiate or any amendments we make. I had the privilege of representing Canada in the United States, and I came into Washington at a very tough time. It was in the middle of the financial crisis, and we obviously in Canada had a lot of setbacks in the financial crisis, but not as many as the United States. We had a much more solid banking system. Our stock markets went down, but we didn't have to bail out the banks. We didn't have to bail out companies. In the United States, they had to bail out Wall Street. At the same time they were bailing out Wall Street, you had a situation where an average American citizen had lost 40% of the value of their homes or their real estates without any kind of consideration. So you can understand in the United States at that time, people really felt abandoned by their government. At that time, it was President Obama. The agreement on the finances of the financial markets was made with Bush, McCain, and Obama together in the cabinet office. But you could really understand why people were angry, because they felt that nobody was on their side. And to some degree, that was true. And of course, out of that grew the Tea Party. They became very, very relevant in U.S. congressional politics. You remember after the first midterms that Obama had with the House, he had lost the House, and his statement was, "We got a shellacking." It was true. But it was all based on Tea Party organizing in a very, very polarized way about us versus them, and with people deciding at the ballot box that there had to be change and real change. So it was a tough time. And trade also was a very tough issue with the United States. We had a situation where jobs were lost on both sides of the border. And in the United States, it was more serious than it was in Canada. And it was serious also for Canada when the United States decided to bring in Buy America. Very popular on a bumper sticker. Very bad economic policy, particularly for their trading partners. And it was interesting because one of the first victims of Buy America was going to be the rolling steel mill in Selkirk, Manitoba, was going to be relocated directly to the United States because of Buy America. They were selling their products into the United States. And it's interesting because at the time I was in Washington, I was trying to figure out a way to deal with Buy America. And I realized that the steel mill in Selkirk was 100% represented by the steel workers that, of course, had members in Canada, 1/3 of their members in Canada, and 2/3 of their members in the United States. So I went to the steelworker president, a guy named Leo Gerard. I said, "We got to get rid of Buy America." I got a few, maybe 2 or 3 F sharps. That wasn't yes. And trying to figure out a way to deal with it. He said, "It's very popular with our members." But I said, "You know, Leo, 1/3 of your members are in Canada." So he eventually agreed to go to Biden, who was in charge of the Recovery Act, go to Pelosi, who was House Leader, and get a waiver for Canada on Buy America for the period of time that Obama was in office. And so I say that because when we're dealing with the United States, we have one of the advantages we have that people may not be aware of, and Mexico at the time did not have that advantage either, is we not only have a strong business community, we not only have strong advocacy from the governments, we have strong advocacies from people in this room, whether they're in the Chamber, the Business Council, and other organizations. We have very, very strong advocacy. But we also have unions that have a lot of power in primaries that don't want to see a situation where Buy America affects their members in Canada. So I just mentioned that because that was the way I got the waiver. We got the waiver for the first few years of the Obama administration. In the United States, trade is really difficult. And there's a real lesson for all of us here on how we can do a better job on trade, the advantages of trade. The people today on those panels, the jobs created in Canada and United States, those kind of stories never get told. They don't get told in elections. In an election campaign, you'll see an ad, say from the opponents of the present government, with a teacher from China taking over all the schools and all the classrooms. You'll see other ads saying, this plant is going to go down because of free trade agreements. And one of the recommendations I would make to business on both sides of the border was when you go from 1 shift to 2 shifts, or when you go from 2 shifts to 3 shifts, to create hundreds or if not thousands of jobs, don't hide that. Have a press conference. So maybe I'm saying this as a former shameless politician. Have a press conference. Tell people what's happening. Because a lot of times the advantages of trade, the economic, the job advantages of trade are not understood, are not communicated, and are not part of the narrative in the debates that have gone on and will be going on in the future. I would say that Canada also has to get its act together with the United States. I am very worried that we signed a piece of paper to go to 2% spending of GDP for the NATO obligations we have. And we signed that piece of paper, I think, 2 years ago. I think John Manley stated that we signed the paper and the check came and we went to the bathroom. Now, I won't repeat what John Manley said. That's very rude. But there's definitely a real need for us to step it up, not just because the United States says we should, not because the other allied countries think we should, but because we need to step up for our own sovereignty. Right, when I was in Washington, and later or before that in Manitoba, I was aware that if a Russian jet was coming over, they are our neighbor in the Arctic. If they're coming over the Arctic Ocean and over our border, they have to scramble jets from Minot, North Dakota to intercept that jet. So I think it would have been better if we had announced tangible ways to get to our 2% before a president is elected tomorrow, or re-elected, or not elected, and or complains about the election. I think it would have made a lot more sense to come and make that decision based on our sovereignty. We want our military in the North. We want our people protecting our Arctic sovereignty. And I think making that announcement, I would argue, would be politically popular. Making an announcement of somebody else as president of the United States, I think will not be popular. And so just in terms of getting people on side. In terms of the existing trade agreement, we have to be very aware that one of the weaknesses, well, first of all, Donald Trump called it the best trade agreement in the history of the world. So I don't know how he can change it. Best trade agreement in the history of the world. I got rid of NAFTA, I got the best trade agreement in the history of the world. Key to negotiating with Donald Trump, give him a bumper sticker and then sign the deal. Just a bumper sticker, that's all he gets, one bumper sticker. But it's really important with this trade agreement that right now there's been a situation where the trade agreement is being undermined by state-owned enterprises from China locating in Mexico. And we had problems with, excuse me, that's good vodka. We had problems with energy with Mexico changing some of the rules. And Canada rightfully, and credit to the Trudeau government, sided with the United States on an energy dispute that went to the panel, the trade panel that was set up under the USMCA. I think absolutely this time around as well, we have to get in early and be on the same side as the United States, because it will affect jobs not only in the United States with state-owned enterprises, but it will also affect jobs in Canada. So it's unfortunate it happened. I think Seamus O'Regan, the former Labour Minister, was trying to spend some time developing unions in Mexico, but what's happened since that trade agreement was signed a couple of years ago, it's turned out to be very unfortunate that this trade agreement is being undermined by state-owned enterprises from China. And that is not only deadly trade policies, economic policies, but it's also deadly political realities in the United States. And I think, I dare say, if it costs jobs in Canada, it will be problems here too. So what can we do about it? We've got to keep reaching out. We've got to keep showing up. As Denise mentioned, Wab Kinew just had a great trade mission to Washington. He made us all very proud. He spoke at the Woodrow Wilson Institute. Jerry, you should be very proud of your member from Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know whether it's the Chamber of Commerce. the AFL-CIO, we're in an environmental place. We went into this room and the roof was clicking away, clacking away, making lots of noise. You couldn't hear anybody. And your guy said, "Oh, have I got some good equipment for you from your company, Jerry?" So I think you sold a lot of equipment down in that trade mission. I also remember hearing from my friends in the Woodrow Wilson Institute that Bob Canoe reminded a lot of them of a guy named Barack Obama. So he was so articulate, so personable, so charming, and so knowledgeable and engaging that he really represented us well. So I think the Manitoba team will be very well served with our Premier. And I'm not just saying that because I get $1 a year as the advisor to the Premier on Canada-US relations. I just think he did a terrific job, and I think you'll hear that from our business community. Other things we've got to deal with on our own side of the border, we can't get complacent. I mean, Kamala Harris just committed herself, if she's elected, to a 28% capital gains tax. I think Trump is down to, if you go 28, he'll go 27. He's making promises. Biden, I think, was at 32, 33, around there. Canada's at 65%. And your cottage is at risk. I mean, my God. I would have moved an amendment in Parliament to exempt cottages and force the Liberals to vote against every cottage owner in Canada. But I'm a junkyard dog, so you can't do that. But I just think we've got to be competitive. And one of the competitive advantages we have in Canada is our great education system. Denise talked about it. Jerry talked about it. Our college system is far superior to the American system. Our universities are way more affordable than the United States. It's a huge economic advantage to have, as people were talking, we were mentioning Red River, University of Manitoba, Asper School of Business, University of Winnipeg, and you can go on and on and on. This is a huge competitive advantage for Canada. Another real competitive advantage is we're less litigious. One of the problems, like in the United States, a doctor pays a fortune to get malpractice insurance. In Canada, is about, I think Jerry is about 1/10 of that for insurance, and we're not as litigious as the United States. Again, another huge advantage. I think we've got to work on it, but we've got to get rid of some of the brush too. We can't. Why are we bringing a digital tax in? The idea is that a digital tax will be an international agreement. So Canada decides to bring in a digital tax. This is not a good way to start a conversation with whoever's president in a couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks. I just want to say that there's been a lot of discussion about this election. The presidency is extremely important to Canada. Who the Americans decide this week is very important. The Congress, I believe, the Congress will be a swap. The Senate will go Republican. The House, if the Democrats win 6 votes, will go Democrat. And that's extremely important for trade, because all the trade agreements have to be ratified, not just negotiated by the President, but ratified in the Senate and ratified in the House. And a lot of people I know in the business community in the United States, I was just talking to them the other day, and I thought they'd be supporting Donald Trump, and they definitely want a division of power. If nothing else, they want a Republican Senate, and if Harris gets elected, and they want a Republican Senate if Trump gets elected, and obviously the House is going to be up for grabs, but we'll have to soon see how that happens. We talked about tariffs and Trump, and I just want to say the odd time, by the way, we should think about tariffs our way. I remember, you talk about agriculture today, I remember the country of origin legislation was going to win in the House against Canada. That would therefore block every agricultural product that had a label on it with Canada. And so what we decided to do, and the Prime Minister decided to do it, but my recommendation was we should put tariffs on California wine coming to Canada. Why California wine? There's no media here. Why California wine? because we had 45 votes against us. If we could switch 45 votes against to 45 votes for us, that's a big swing in a house of 435 people. And why is Canadian wine such a big deal? The largest purchaser at that time of wine in the world was the Ontario Liquor Board. The second largest, I don't know if it's still true, it might be Costco now. The second largest purchaser of wine was Quebec. The third largest purchaser of wine was in British Columbia. Finally, people want to know who's going to win the election. Everybody's saying it's a jump ball. They won't say who they think it's going to be. I'm just going to give you a prediction. Who would I want to be tonight going into tomorrow? I would rather be Harris than Trump if I was a candidate for president. She's got a 9-point gap lead with women voters. That's right. It's going to be women. And Trump's got a 6-point lead with men. The other thing about women, there's more of them, actually. Those pollsters don't include there's more women than men. And so I think women, the ballot question is a woman's right to decide versus this horrible situation on the border that's been used by the Trump group. And I think at the end of the day, with women on your side, I would rather have Taylor Swift than Hulk Hogan. That's my prediction, and thank you very, very much.
As the last person speaking tonight and following Gary, I guarantee you two things. I'll be brief, and it's an easy topic because I get to thank our speaker. I've had the privilege of, as the chair of the Business Council, working with Gary in a number of different things. But it's interesting, we talk politics, we talk business, but we always gravitate to the most important thing in this province, which is the Blue Bombers. We've both served as directors there, and talking about the importance of this Saturday's game, which I can tell you is now sold out, and us heading to BC and retrieving the Grey Cup and bringing it back where it belongs. So, but I want to say it's my pleasure to thank our keynote speaker, the Honorable Gary Doer. During his time as Premier, Canadian Ambassador, and even now, Mr. Durer has always taken the time to meet, educate on these important topics, and ways that we can work together. As you may know, one of the Business Council of Manitoba's main areas of focus has been free trade and the Canada-US trade relations. Who better to hear about what we've done and what we need to do than a distinguished leader and a diplomat who has significantly shaped the landscape of Canada-US trade relations. A true champion of Manitoba and Canada, he has and continues to be instrumental in advocating for Canadian interests in Washington, D.C., and navigating the complex political landscapes and ensuring that our nation's voice was heard on critical issues. Gary's work on promoting numerous agreements that would benefit the Canada-US trade relations, ensuring Canada's entry into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and being a strong advocate and defender of projects like advancing beyond the Border Action Plan and ensuring measures like the pre-clearance agreement were in place to facilitate smoother trade and travel between Canada and our American neighbours. Resolving trade disputes such as the Softwood Lumber Agreement, and helping negotiate a presidential permit for the construction of the Gordie Howe Bridge between Windsor and Detroit. Thank you, Mr. Duer, for all that you've done for our province and our country, and we're proud that you're from Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Mike. Really appreciate that. We also had a part that if anyone had any questions that they would like to ask the Honorable Gary Doer. Does anyone have any questions? I know I'm bringing you back up. Oh, this is your opportunity. We don't get this every day, so if anyone has any questions.
I already made the prediction on the election. Nobody else has. Look at all these posters. Oh, it's a jump ball. It's a jump ball. Congratulations, Arnie, on getting that Business in the Arts Award. We're all very proud of you. Yeah.
My question is, you predicted the U.S. results tomorrow. What about the Canadian results?
Oh, I'm surprised you asked. How surprised. You know, Arnie, you should get more involved in politics. You know, you shouldn't sit in the sidelines for so long. Well, it's, you know, one of the things I think that people aren't talking about a lot in Western Canada is that they're talking about Pierre versus Justin, and you know, in that context, they're talking a lot about who's going to be the next leader of our government. I think that people should not underestimate Blanchette in Quebec. So as somebody that worked a lot with Jean Charest to approve the Council of Federations, to try to get an alternative to separation, he's a charismatic, great communicator. He just beat the Liberals in that by-election in Montreal. This is their bread and butter constituency. And I am worried about what's going on in terms of national unity if that happens. So I don't find a lot of media coverage on that dynamic right now. I think the Parti Québécois may beat Legault. I don't know whether they will or not, but I just wouldn't underestimate the charisma of Blanchette. So that's what keeps me awake a little bit at night. The federal scene, Gordon Giffen was a great friend of mine, and he had great advice for any politician. He had worked for Sam Nunn, who had 3 terms as senator from Georgia, chair of the Armed Services Committee. I dealt with him a lot in Washington. He knew everything that was going on. Sam Nunn had a great term. You got to get out before the Grim voter or the Grim Reaper gets you. And so I certainly believe that if you have the good fortune, and it doesn't always happen, if you have the good fortune to leave on your own time. Now, I hadn't expected to be picked as ambassador by Prime Minister Harper, but if you can leave on your own time, I think it preserves your legacy, your dignity, it just preserves you. I've seen really good people, including in Manitoba. The last speech they made was not a very pleasant experience, and that includes all the political parties. And these were really good people that had jobs that I had. And I think having talked or listened to the Prime Minister, I think he's convinced, you know, in a competition, person to person, he can win. But you got to know when to jump in, and you got to know when to gracefully exit. If I was, 10 years is a long time to be in politics, because you're always going to make somebody happy and more people unhappy, especially if you're doing big things. And I think that I guess I'm answering your question. I think 10 years is a good time. Good run. Adios. Yes.
Earlier about water, and in Alberta they have oil, and Saskatchewan they have potash. We have a lot of water, and you get some applause when you say we're not selling our water. Why can't we sell some of our water? We have a lot.
Why can't we sell?
Yeah. Why can't we sell some of our water?
Well, we sell water, bottled water. I think there's one plant, maybe you own it, in southern Manitoba. And I think we sell some of that, but we won't allow the Red River to be reversed and Lake Winnipeg be drained. And I might be telling tales out of school, but I remember we had a premier's meeting one time, people from all political parties, I think it was in British Columbia, and there was the thought that Newfoundland and Labrador was going to sell icebergs to New York State for water. And all of us came to that meeting with the same advice. Now, we had already passed no bulk water exports, but all of us came to that meeting with the same advice that if we treated it as a commodity, it would become subject to the rules of the NAFTA trade agreement. And every premier, I mean, Mike Harris and Gordon Campbell, I remember every premier asked Newfoundland and Labrador not to do it, and they didn't. So I don't know whether that answers your question. We do have a lot of water. Water is more precious than oil, and it's great for our country to have it, and respect it, and cherish it, and preserve it, and swim in it, and paddleboard in it. It's, if you can. I actually think these summers lately, I think have raised more awareness on the climate issues because, this whole summer people were picking up their phones and seeing a smoke alert. So in the United States, they're seeing hurricanes. So some of this weather stuff will have an impact on policy. But that's water, I think, is still part of that identity as a Canadian. I believe that. Oh, yes, okay. Hi.
Hi there. With regards to the far north and the state of our military, and the sorry state of it, not all that considered, how would you, if you were a high-level politician, how would you rectify Canada's low military spending, especially considering we're not even at 2% yet? How would you get it? Because there's obviously some sort of kickback from the government where they don't want to spend that much for some reason. If you were in a high level, how would you?
Well, part of the problem now is, I think part of the political problem now, if you spend it because the Americans are telling you to spend it, Canadians won't like that. And I actually thought 2 years ago I spoke about this issue, about get to the 2% as quickly as you can. And this is actually having an impact not only on our own sovereignty and our own security, it does have an impact on economic trade. When I first got to Washington, I was there only a week, and I was invited to a meeting of all ambassadors that had military personnel in Afghanistan. And I remember this guy named General Petraeus came up to me, and he said, "Oh, by the way, there's about 12 people coming to this meeting today. I'm glad to meet you. You're the new ambassador. You just should know that a lot of these countries that are going to be here today talking, they're in the Club Med section of Afghanistan." And he said, Canada is in the toughest part with the most skilled soldiers, the bravest people, and all around Washington, the work, the sacrifice, the efforts of the Canadian military is respected. And boy, did I find that all around town when I went around to senators and congressional representatives. They're very, very aware of the reality that Canada, United States are friends, neighbors, and allies. And sometimes we make better judgments over the years. I think we made a better judgment on Vietnam. I think we made a better judgment ultimately on Iraq. And that's part of what Canada brings to the table, but also part of what we bring is our military skill and equipment. And I think that's part of we signed it. We signed the NATO agreement. It's easier for us to meet that if we do it for military objectives in our own country, particularly the Arctic, than it is somebody like Donald Trump telling you to do it. People won't. I don't want that. I don't think anybody does. I'm sorry.
Gary?
Yes.
Over here. Thank you very much for your comments. We talked today a lot about the impact of agriculture from a trade standpoint.
Yeah.
What's your view on oil? And would it be any different under one of the two presidents that are vying for the job?
On agriculture?
Oil.
Oil.
Yeah.
On oil, I think I've often believed that we should get a table together on energy and on energy and the environment together. I think having one table on the environment, one table on energy doesn't work. And one of the suggestions I made to the Obama administration, and with the support of the Prime Minister, is that we look at methane gas regulations, methane regulations. Alberta and Saskatchewan, by the way, have the best, according to the World Bank, I think the latest research is they have the best regulations in the world. And why not sit at the table and talk about environment, methane, and energy security together? When I was in Washington again, I was dealing with transmission lines, particularly from Quebec, and I tried to give them advice because I said, you're never going to get a transmission line through New Hampshire. They sort of flicked me away like a foreign object in their salad, but they never did get the transmission line through. They eventually had to go through New York State and come around. Massachusetts wanted their power, Boston wanted their power, and but you got to listen to, you can't get certainty if you're not listening to where you're putting things. But I do think we should have one table. The United States needs our oil. It's whether, and we, obviously, I was there when we were approved Pennsylvania natural gas going up to Canada in a pipeline. I think we should have a table on energy and the environment. Look at what Prime Minister Mulroney did with Ronald Reagan. They got the acid rain agreement, and they've got all kinds of other agreements. I know with the Obama administration, we were able to take the tailpipe emission standards in Manitoba and Quebec and British Columbia and get an international agreement on reducing emissions through tailpipe emissions, energy efficiency. We can do this, but we're just sort of do it. I think we've got to do it together for our planet and for our economy. I think people are smart enough to know both things are important, and if you do them both together, you can get more compromises as opposed to just winner take all kind of agreements that go nowhere. So, no matter who's president, energy will be very important from Canada, and the environment will be very important as well. What did Ronald Reagan say about the acid rain agreement, or about the ozone layer and everything else? I think Colin Powell's told the story. Ronald Reagan didn't got advice to sign it and not sign it. And he just said, well, maybe we just need a little insurance. Maybe we should sign it. Maybe that's what we need now, a little more insurance for our planet. Yes.
Thank you, Gary, for being here and for what you have done for the country and the province. My question is, we keep losing our entrepreneurs to the US. We keep talking about US politicians a lot, and when I meet with entrepreneurs like who have been ex-BlackBerry, Shopify, or new big tech, they tell me one thing, that it would be nicer if politicians in Canada can talk to each other and reduce the cost of doing business between provinces. So my question is, how would you advise the politicians in Canada, in provincial politics and national politics, to be more about thinking about the national unity for economics, for culture, and together to reduce the cost of doing business and save our competitive advantage of great education, because we are losing talent to the US more than we know. Thanks.
Thank you. I hope BlackBerry is a great product. Are you working for BlackBerry? Well, we have something to thank for BlackBerry. The owner of BlackBerry wanted an NHL team, and he threatened to sue every owner of an NHL team in a class action suit. And thank you, BlackBerry, because the Winnipeg Jets are here and not where the BlackBerry is located. So that's just a little bit of trivia. I do think that we have a better education system in Canada. It's an advantage. We had, I think, a better legal system. One would argue we have a better banking system. I think we have a lot of advantages in Canada. I think we've got to be, but we can't have a huge gap on competitiveness. I mean, Harris, who's supposed to be the left-wing candidate, has got a platform of a 28% capital gains tax. Now, who is getting up in the morning in Ottawa and saying, Houston, we got a problem here? I mean, if that's the left-wing position, how are we going to, compete? And I think we want to compete on education and training and skilled people and smart people and entrepreneurs. And but we also have to have a level playing field on the fiscal side of that. And we lowered the corporate tax. It was controversial in our caucus, Gene, to say the least, when we lowered the corporate tax. But we weren't competitive with Alberta, and so we took it from 17 to 12. I don't know what it is now, so I better be careful. I don't. I'll be careful. But I know we weren't perfect. But but I think that those are the things we got to do to keep competitive. I just believe that. There's no reason why. Look at the NHL, for God's sakes. I talk hockey again. You don't think these players are going down and signing contracts where they're paying no state income tax in Nevada, now, I'm not suggesting we do it here. I don't tell Wabka I'm saying no provincial tax. I wouldn't go with that anyways. But we've got to look at how competitive we are in a lot of different areas. I don't like Mark Stone having to sign to Las Vegas to get much more money because of the no taxes in Nevada. But I'm biased.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. On that note, lowering taxes, I'll leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for your gracious responses and to entertain our questions. We really, really appreciate this. We really appreciate that. So we know that they want our entrepreneurs, they want our gas, they want our water, they want our energy. So I think we're on the right side of the negotiation tables. So I think we're going to be okay. So ladies and gentlemen, I trust that you agree that this has been a very special evening and that it's lived up to your expectations. It takes quite a team to put on an evening like this, so together, and so I just want to take a moment to thank, again, I know we've thanked people, but I'd like to conclude by thanking our panelists. This is an amazing opportunity to get in this room, one room, all these experts on this, and it's very enlightening, because, I know that I've learned a lot this evening, and I'm sure that you've learned a lot, and we've just been reminded of so many different things that are so important to our economy. I thank the head table for being here this evening, our guest speaker, of course, the production team led by Jonathan Edwards. Thank you very much. The reason Joe has asked to have this filmed, and he will be presenting this to across Canada as well. So we had this filmed this evening. I do really want to thank the staff at the Associates Office, Madison Wilford and Jackson Miller. Thank you very much for your efforts. This was really, really appreciated. So they went over and beyond to make sure that everything was great tonight. I do really want to thank the Business Council of Manitoba, Bram Strain, and the support of Rosie Infantino. And again, the Fort Garry Hotel for their exceptional service. We thank you. And of course, all of you for participating this evening in tonight's celebration, and to all of you that traveled from Toronto to be here. So we appreciate that. So I trust that you found the presentations and the event both educational and enjoyable. Joe has asked me to remind you that if you're interested in learning more about the CBHA, their website is cbha.ca. And last but certainly not least, thank you to the CBHA and to you, Joe, for choosing Winnipeg as your launch and for keeping Canadian business history alive and thriving. This is something very important that we just don't hear enough about, and we need to be reminded. And having our Ask for students here this evening to hear this, I know that you've really appreciated this, and you know that there's a big history association that is the foundation to your learning. And thank you, Joe, for providing us this opportunity. You've been a pleasure to work with. And let us hope that tomorrow's American election result will be favorable for our province and for our country as a whole. The bar will remain open, so enjoy the rest of your evening, and let's see who else has different predictions for this tomorrow. Thank you very much.